It's true hell at the front. The Russians don't know where to run, while Ukrainian defenders are effectively hitting enemy equipment. The enemy, the Leopards, are roaring at full power, while the old Ladas just won't start. The Russian Black Sea Fleet has become a real laughingstock. The end of the occupiers' army is near. All of this in our episode Hellish Point. Ukrainian fighters gave the Russians a good beating near Toretsk. Absolutely all occupiers fall under the distribution, and those who manage to escape literally whine to their commanders and beg to go home. They say, "We refuse to go any further." What Ukrainian weaponry has become the biggest fear for the enemy? We'll cover this in our material.
Today, our mobile group visited the United Assault Brigade of the National Police. Human. The guys are working in the Turkish direction with the American M101A1 howitzer, which has a caliber 18 of 105 mm. The cannon is already well entrenched, it's stable and hits the target accurately. You will see its work today.
Cannon! The soldier with the call sign Jax has been working on the American M101 howitzer for 3 months now. Before this, I was on a Soviet one, Tezok.
There are a lot of hideouts, almost all the same. It's easier here. There are 2 heaters going. One responds to the catch. One answers the bait for the catch. The other one is responsible for aiming at the targets, meaning the shooting range. That's how it is.
Most often, they use it against enemy infantry. They hit at a distance of up to 10 kilometers. They also hit motorcyclists and small armored vehicles of the Russians.
Somewhere, aerial reconnaissance spotted where the enemy is accumulating. It could be some house, it could be some basement, it could be a thicket. So the enemy is accumulating. They give us the coordinates, we quickly get set up, zeroing in. And it went off. We fired. If the target is hit, the camouflage, the cover, everything worked perfectly.
This American field howitzer from World War II, but the fighters say that even though it's old, it's reliable.
The main thing is to service it on time, to clean it on time, to take care of the recoil mechanism, and to oil it. So, if you look at all of this, it will keep serving and serving.
The guys are waiting in the shelter. They have already set up their dugout. There is communication, a radio station, EcoFlow. You can prepare simple food.
What's the most delicious thing? The youth position. The most delicious thing? Homemade pastries. I'll add something, passing it on. Yes, these are the most delicious.
Volodymyr Kravchuk, Army TV for US Ukraine. Marathon, Unified News.
In the Pokrovsk direction, the enemy is gritting their teeth and trying with their last strength to break through the Ukrainian defense. Every day, the occupiers suffer huge losses. Their equipment is burning, ammunition depots are exploding, and the second army in the world once again proves that they can only scatter words. The armed forces of Ukraine are using this and stubbornly cleaning the Ukrainian land of the enemy. About the details of the powerful confrontation next.
The enemy does not give up on their intentions to capture Pokrovsk. And although the intensity of the fighting has slightly decreased, it means that the occupiers are trying to regroup their forces. The soldiers of the Sherchny Dovbush strike drone unit of the 68th Separate Mountain Brigade are telling us,
this is what is happening before the storm right now. Right now there is a large accumulation of equipment in the cities they have occupied, such as the settlements of Dovina and Novorodivka. These are very large cities where a significant amount of equipment and personnel can be gathered. I think they're just getting ready. They are now stalled in our direction, I think, because they have their last assaults were very unsuccessful. They were unable to land their infantry and even lost armored vehicles. Constantly, I think they just tried to sidestep us and take Pokrovsk without a fight.
The Russians want to bypass Pokrovsk from the west.
They are trying to flank us now. They also reached the railway. This side is well cooked. So, thank God they have been holding it for a certain period of time. But not just yet. There hasn't been anything that threatened us since autumn. Today and tomorrow, there will be operations in the city of Pokrovsk.
The occupiers are deploying a huge number of personnel, but they are also suffering massive losses.
I'm already losing 100%. 8,000 packed occupiers, that's just from our company. Well, from the beginning here, when we came in since the end of March, And there were actually up to 200 pieces of equipment here. More than that, like in just 1 month, in January, we burned 92 vehicles.
The Russians are storming in small groups, using light vehicles, scooters and bikes to transport their troops.
Lanos, Volodymyr Zhiguli, Moskvich, everything that can drive. It's like in that Max movie, they just cut off the roof and throw out the doors. Well, here and there's a full vehicle and they're like driving.
And although there are no mechanized assaults right now, the enemy is not letting up on their pressure.
They are non-stop over there. If there's an opportunity, they move forward, that's it. Like, so that people understand that there's nothing, that they are just exhausted. A large number of them keep coming, pushing. They destroy the equipment and they keep coming. The pequots were destroyed in a couple of minutes, where the second pequot was already...
Here are unique footage of the surrender of an inventive occupier. The invader, who didn't want to die on foreign soil, took a bicycle and fled from his comrades. To our positions, already close to them, the Russian used his second trump card, pulling out an icon.
They captured one soldier and he started to surrender with an icon in his hand. He was just on the road with a bicycle, holding an icon in his hand. At the time when he was coming towards us, his own people wanted to beat him. The artillery was working, the mortars, everything was firing at him.
The Hornets are destroying equipment in the enemy's rear and targeting the houses and bunkers where the occupiers are hiding. In a day, there can be several dozen combat sorties.
The most we had in our crew was 56 sorties. Then there were infantry assaults. Then they ran between the landings across the field and we caught them in the fields. Then our crew killed 24 people in one day.
The Shershny say they will do everything to help our infantry.
Here you do the job, because tomorrow someone from your infantry, your friends, could die and that's it. It's all about the thrill.
From Donetsk, Marina Smoleva, Ukraine Marathon Unified News.
The hellish cauldron for the occupiers from the armed forces of Ukraine is crushing enemy columns with the legendary leopards. Their combat sorties are turning into a real meat grinder for the Russian invaders. In just a few minutes, several units of armored vehicles are taken out, and the remaining infantry is simply fleeing. Details in our story.
A sturdy predator, the Leopard tank, was parked in the middle of the winter forest of the Donetsk region. He's far from being alone here. Although you may not notice them immediately among the camouflage nets and tree branches, the rumble of engines is hinted at from almost every forest strip. There's a whole tank park here. The crew of this Leopard is currently on a break.
The soldiers have earned it after they destroyed the Russian hideouts almost at point-blank range. The Tatar says even though his Leopard doesn't really like it. Donetsk mud, which can even jam the caterpillars, but the cannon shoots very accurately, which the enemy sensed.
But of course they are afraid, they run away. Because our Leopard, it takes accuracy, speed. Like if everything is set up properly here, we can hit within a meter, even at 3.5.
This battleship demolished a building in the village of Sontsivka in the Kurakiv direction at a time when fighting broke out for this settlement. And even though the village is now occupied, at that time the Leopard crew saved our soldiers.
They shot into the basement where the enemy was while our troops were above, which allowed our infantry to exit and clear the building.
This was one of Tatar's first outings. He didn't expect everything to go so well. The guy is only 23, but he transferred from conscription to a contract in a combat unit.
I decided to sign the contract because I wanted to go to war. I was just really tired of sitting in the rear while my buddies were absolutely fighting and I had nothing to brag about.
The Leopard is covered by two directions at once, Kurakivsky and Pokrovsky, the most active in the Donetsk region. The influx of Russian drones has made the work of tankers on the front lines more difficult. Now they are not standing in positions but acting as emergency aid. We need to destroy the enemy's fortifications when the artillery or our drones can't handle it. That's when they call for them. The modernization of the foreign Leopard in a Ukrainian way? Right now, the guys are stretching out the net. It's called a mangal here in the army. It protects the tank from enemy FPV drones. It's a very necessary thing when the enemy's FPV shock is just overwhelming in the front area near Kurakovo. But this doesn't protect forever, says Ruslan. He was burning in the tank with a full ammunition load along with the crew, which includes 3 more comrades.
There was the first hit right in front of me, and I almost dropped my hands from the wheel.
Here is a video showing a Leopard on fire. A Russian drone hit him in battle. It pierced through the protective net and armor, destroying the rep and even the radio station.
Left. We're leaving. Turn around, friends. Turn around.
Without communication in the burning Leopard, Ruslan started to save the vehicle and his comrades.
You have so much adrenaline pumping that you don't even think about it. You just hope to make it back with the crew, everything's fine. And we didn't blow up, we had nothing. We left, and they immediately met us, put it out, and the medics arrived to check on us.
Here in these frames are the consequences of the fire. The Leopard is currently under repair. The crew has transferred to another battleship. And it's not a duty shift that's going on now, because in the Kurakiv direction, the enemy is preparing an offensive in the Constantinople area to block the Donetsk-Zaporizhia road and push our units out of the vicinity of Kurakiv. So the tankers know that at any moment they could get the order to head out to support our infantry.
Now it's hot, not just at the front. Russians are being massively hit by glasses with a surprise. The occupiers themselves are forced to fight on old-fashioned vehicles, and in some cases even on donkeys. All this is accompanied by a lack of tactics and the old Soviet school of meat assaults. Do the Russians really not learn from their mistakes and keep stepping on the same rakes over and over again? We'll tell you more about this next.
Russian drone pilots faced a series of explosions from FPV goggles during their use.
We're opening the gray box, and I'll give it back to the girls.
Thank you for watching. And the Vitanata is disconnected. Done.
They are changing, increasing. The adaptive and drone have been directed through Russian volunteers' organic organs for directly on the front line of combat engagement. They will activate the devices when the Hellish fan is turned on.
According to sources, the operation is being carried out by specialists from the HUR in Ukrainian intelligence.
Now, the pilots of the Russian Federation's FPV drones are starting to face God's wrath en masse for the innocent people they have killed and the atrocities they commit. Soon, there will be many more such facts, because now, the Bandera hideouts, where they make surprise goggles for the Russian occupiers, are not only in the Ukrainian Carpathians, but also in Russian Siberia.
The first communication from the Belgorod region. Then already...
According to information from open sources, at least 8 pilots have been affected by the surprise goggles, and the operation is currently still ongoing, with additional updates expected.
And the positive result is that, according to the Russian side, more than 80 given points. And equipped, I emphasize once again, well, the old island table with remote control was transferred to a mediocre operator unit in the White Army of the occupying country.
It is claimed that Ukrainian scouts were inspired by the experience of their Israeli colleagues, who planted explosives in the pages of members of the terrorist group Hezbollah.
Pagers are practically no longer used in the world, but Hezbollah still uses them. When you press the button, the only one who will suffer? It's the terrorist himself. Even if his wife or children are nearby, only he will suffer.
As we know, Russian troops do not use pagers, and the entire Ukrainian intelligence chose not just...
Up to 70% of the personnel costs for armored vehicles are related to operational work. Yes, Ukrainian and Russian are spoken by the operators of drones and artificial goods, if I can put it that way, for its preparation. Serious investment is needed, and most importantly, time.
Those who came with war to a peaceful foreign country seem to be getting what they deserve. And who knows what surprises the Russians are expecting from military equipment. Next.
In the attack on the old rams of Chela. Now, for the so-called Second Army in the world, this has become a reality. Here's one of the latest vivid examples from the Luhansk direction. The liberators are charging forward in pink Zhigulis. Russian military equipment stocks are rapidly depleting and cannot be replenished. So the only solution is the civilian automotive industry.
Lada cars, not only Zhiguli models but also the slightly more powerful Niva, began to appear in large quantities in Russian assault units, as a few months ago, stocks of armored vehicles began to run low.
The reasons for such losses are Ukrainian drones, which on the front line are organizing a real hunt for at least one Russian tank.
According to the Russian side, there is total superiority in IPV drones in Ukraine. This allows for negotiations in Ottawa regarding Ukraine. The numerical strength of the enemy's heavy armored vehicles is significant.
Louis publication of the American edition Forbes claims that the use of the army of Rev Zhiguls could be a turning point.
When last fall, the first Russian assault groups got into their Zhiguli and set off on almost suicidal attacks, the attacks by Zhiguli could be attributed to the neutral zone patrolled by drones in eastern Ukraine. In isolated cases committed by the most desperate and poorly equipped Russian units, it's no longer possible to paint such a rosy picture for the efforts of the Russian army in terms of mechanization. With losses of armored vehicles and other heavy equipment exceeding 15,000, attacks using Zhigulis are becoming increasingly common.
The losses of armored vehicles in the Russian army are about 6,000 units per year. Previously, the Kremlin made up for these losses by preserving Soviet equipment. But now, there's almost none left, because these stocks are not limitless.
The Russian Federation currently has the ability to produce heavy armored vehicles up to 200 units per year. But considering the losses on the front lines, these figures are minimal and don't even address tactical levels, the tasks of the occupying army in Ukraine. So, the Russian defense industry at the moment, thank you, the priority is not on production, but rather on the restoration of armored vehicles. It's important to note that these are mostly old tanks like the T-55, T-54, T-62 and T-72 5 after 4, T-60, 27-2.
Of course, the 2025 assaults are different from the assaults at the beginning of a full-scale invasion. Because the occupier has realized that large mechanized breakthroughs only lead to significant losses in equipment and personnel. But the attacks on the Zhiguli also indicate that the Russian army is reaching a critical point in terms of restoring its equipment.
The normalization of attacks on Ladas is a clear sign that this turning point has been passed. With each passing day of Russia's increasingly large-scale war in Ukraine, Russians will have less and less armored vehicles, and they will increasingly rely on compact cars to transport troops into battle.
Going into an attack in Zhigulis is clearly a one-way ticket. And does anyone want this lucky ticket? It's up to the Russian soldier to decide whether to pull out or not.
The Russian Black Sea fleet has become a real laughingstock. Ukrainian defenders have turned the Black Sea into a complete trap for the enemy. Explosions are ringing out in the ports of Crimea, and Russian sailors are panicking as they abandon their ships. Russia was definitely not prepared for this. In contrast, Ukrainians have a lot of experience with special operations and are eager to share their knowledge. You can find more details about this in our article.
The Russian cruiser Moskva and the landing ship Cesar Kunikov
and this is the missile boat Ivanovits. This is how precisely, step by step, the defense forces are destroying enemy ships. In this naval battle, we have already accounted for over 24 ships that will never be able to enter the Ukrainian Black Sea again.
As of this morning, there were no ships in the waters of the Black Sea, the waters of the Azov Sea. We haven't been observing since last year. When several attacks were happening from our side, it was quite average. The Russians, Oda, believed that there was a danger, and they, for example, withdrew even beyond the limits of the Tsemes Bay. 5 carriers of cruise missiles.
It is precisely our cruise missiles and sea drones that have become too dangerous for the Russian fleet. Because of this, the ships that are still left in Russia, the enemy hastily withdrew from occupied Crimea and the Azov Sea. Now, they are based in Novorossiysk.
Submarines and frigates and missile boats that carrying calibers. This is the main strike force. The Russians, that's exactly where they are. And the landing ships, by the way, are mostly all there. The deployment of these ships into the sea may not last long. So they went out in an hour. They deployed to the combat training area. Launched missiles. They returned back.
The destroyed and damaged Russian ships remained in occupied Crimea. There is a repair base that services the enemy fleet.
In Sevastopol, there are also several large landing ships, which were damaged, including this is the Olenigorsky Hill. Minsk is located there. And there are the ships of the water area protection, so to speak. So these are missile boats, minesweepers, missile ships, corvettes, and anti-submarine vessels to protect the base point.
The explosions have destroyed Russian military logistics. And then we also destroyed the oil products in Feodosia and Sevastopol. All of this has reduced the combat capability of the Russian army. In almost 3 years of full-scale war, the Russian Black Sea Fleet has lost 30% of its combat potential.
A third of the ships have been completely disabled. At the beginning, there were about 80 combat units. A third is actually already not in service, but an even larger number of ships sustained damage. Frigates and Makara. The FSB ships sustained damage among the patrol vessels. Of the 4 in total, only 1 was unharmed. The last was Pavel Derzhavin, who received 2 injuries in 2 days.
Russia, as a rule, hides strikes on its facilities and denies losses. But they are so extensive that it's impossible not to notice them. This also affected the families of Russians who were brought to Crimea to serve in the Navy. Now they have returned to Russia because the occupying fleet on the peninsula has practically disappeared. Lviv Sidbulayeva, We Are Ukraine, Marathon United.
News? The waves crash gently into the vestibule, she tells me.
Today, Army TV is showcasing the Swedish warship Compact 90, which is designed for patrolling both maritime and coastal areas. It's equipped for various operations, including support for special operations. And now we are moving to open the Black Sea, also for various combat social operations to support special operations. And now we are moving to open the Black Sea.
The boat is multifunctional, capable of performing a wide variety of tasks at sea. Moreover, it has shown that it can operate in any weather.
The landing craft, Combat Bow 90, is located inside the boat. Here we can easily descend into it. It's quite large, and you can even transport some cargo here. For the BC, after the landing compartment, the control cabin, where the commander sits and actually steers the combat boat. Next, one door opens. The second door. And now we are going outside to the bow. The ramp is lowering and the guys are disembarking.
Right now, if I hear an alarm while we're talking, in a minute we'll be ready to go. In a minute, we'll already be there.
It's like starting a car. Started, warmed, and we're good to go.
Yeah, you can probably even hear it. We constantly keep our engines ready for immediate action. Can walk in shallow water, can go out without damage to the equipment or the shore.
By the way, this boat is very fast and maneuverable. It reaches speeds of up to 40 knots, which is about 70-75 kilometers per hour. Everything is felt very strongly. You have to constantly brace yourself, hold on to something because it can easily throw you off balance.
It's very, very maneuverable. A full stop takes us about 20 meters. Which is probably 1.5 hull lengths.
How
to say it? Wet. It's cold.
Lonely.
Lonely, but let's put it this way. That's very interesting.
You've been in the army for a long time?
Well, I'm still talking about myself. The youngest man, I recently just turned 22.
Why in the ministry?
I absolutely love water, and I love extreme sports. I love learning.
That's all from Tioman. Even more hellish news from the front in our next episode.